The Poet's Story. My name is William. I'm an old man now. People call me the poet. I sit in the park and read poems. Children come and listen. Some people smile and some cry. They say my poems are beautiful. But no one knows my story. I never told it before. I kept it in my heart for many years. Now I am ready to share it. I want people to know why I write poems. I want them to know my past. When I was young, I lived in a quiet town. I was a happy boy. I loved books and the sound of rain, but more than anything, I loved a girl. Her name was Rose. She had red hair and a soft smile. She was kind and her eyes were full of light. We were young, but we were in love. We walked in the fields and talked about dreams. She said, "Never leave me." I said, "I will stay with you forever." We were happy. Life was simple, but the world changed. One day, war came to our country. The army called young men. I had to go. I held Rose's hand and said goodbye. She cried and gave me a white flower. "Come back to me," she said. I promised I would. But war is long and war is hard. I went far away. I fought in cold places. I wrote letters to Rose, but I never got a reply. Still, I hoped. I dreamed of her face every night. I waited for the day I could return. After many years, the war ended. I was alive, but I was not the same. My hands were tired and my heart was heavy. I lost many friends. I saw pain and fear, but one thing kept me strong, my love for Rose. I took the first train back to my town. I looked out the window and thought about her. I held the white flower she gave me. It was old and dry, but I kept it safe. I imagined her smile. I believed she was waiting. When I reached the town, the sun was setting. The streets looked the same, but I felt different. I walked to her house with hope in my heart. My hands shook as I knocked on the door. A man opened it. He looked at me and said nothing. Then I saw her. She stood behind him, holding a baby. Her eyes met mine, and she froze. She looked shocked. I could see her heart break. She whispered, "William." I nodded. I wanted to speak, but no words came out. She stepped outside. The baby cried. She said, "I thought you were dead." We waited, but no one knew. I was alone. I had to move on. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were full of tears. I understood. My promise was broken, but not by choice. I turned and walked away. I didn't say goodbye. My legs felt weak and my chest hurt. That night, I sat alone under a tree. The sky was full of stars, but I felt empty. I looked at the old flower and cried for the first time in years. After that night, I had no place to go. My house was gone. My family was gone. My love was gone too. I walked from town to town. I slept under trees and in old train stations. People passed me, but no one stopped to ask if I was okay. I felt invisible. The days were long and the nights were cold. I had nothing but my memories, and they followed me everywhere. One day I sat on a bench in a quiet park. I watched the birds fly in the sky and the children play near the fountain. Their laughter was soft, like music. It made me think of Rose and how we used to laugh together. I missed her more than words could say. I took out an old notebook and a pencil. That was the first time I wrote a poem. It was simple and short, but it came from deep inside my heart. That poem was for her. Writing helped me feel better. It was like I could talk without speaking. I wrote about love, about the pain in my heart, and about the dreams I once had. I wrote about the war and the silence that came after. I wrote about stars, trees, rain, and quiet nights. My poems were my way of telling the world that I was still here, even if no one saw me. Soon I began reading my poems in town squares. I stood on small boxes and spoke loudly. People listened. Some stopped to smile, some stayed longer and cried. One woman came to me and said, "Your words touch the heart." That day I felt something warm inside me. I had no home and no money, but I had something special. I had my poems, and they gave me peace. Years went by. My hair turned grey, then white. My steps became slow, but I never stopped writing. I kept my notebook with me all the time. I read to people in parks, at markets, and even on buses. That is how people began to know me, not as a sad old man, but as the poet who turned pain into poetry. Years passed, and people began to notice me. I read my poems in the park, on the street, and in small cafes. People stopped to listen. They smiled, they clapped, and sometimes they cried. My poems spoke about love, loss, and life. Even if they didn't know my story, they felt something in my words. Some people came back every week. One old man said, "Our poems remind me of my wife." A young girl told me, "On words are like magic." I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt like my poems had a home in their hearts. This made me feel warm inside. One day, a woman named Emily came to me after I finished reading. She had kind eyes and a soft smile. "I love your poems," she said. "They are full of real feelings." We talked for hours. She was a writer too. She understood my pain, my love, and my memories. It felt good to share my heart with someone who listened. Emily asked if I wanted to make a book. I said yes. She helped me write my poems on paper and make them into a small book. We worked hard. When the book was finished, people bought it and shared it with others. Many said, "Your poems gave me hope." That was the biggest gift of all. Emily and I spent more time together. We walked in the park and talked about poems, love, and life. She made me feel young again. I told her more about Rose. She listened carefully and never judged me. I told her about the day I saw Rose with her baby. I told her how I walked away and never spoke to her again. One evening, Emily looked at me and said, "You still love her, don't you?" I nodded. "Yes," I said, "but I also understand now. Life is not always what we want, but it gives us something new." Emily smiled and held my hand. "Your pain made you a poet. Your heart gave you a gift." That night I sat alone with my thoughts. I looked at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Rose. Because of you, I found my words." My heart felt light. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt full of memories, love, and poems. Next day, I wrote a new poem. It was not about sadness. It was about peace. It was about how every pain can become something beautiful. I read it in the park. People clapped louder than ever before. Emily smiled at me from the crowd. That day was special. I saw how my story touched people. Many came to me and said, "Your poem made me cry," or "I feel the same way." I didn't feel alone anymore. I saw that my poems helped others heal too. Emily brought me tea and said, "You gave your pain a voice. That is a gift." I smiled and nodded. For many years I held my story inside. I thought no one would understand, but now I knew I had to share it. One boy asked me, "Why do you always write about love?" I looked at him and said, "Because love is strong. It doesn't die. Even when we lose it, stays with us." He smiled and said, "I want to write poems too." That made me happy. Now I go to the park every Sunday. I sit on the same bench. I read poems. I smile at the children. I watch the sky. I remember Rose. I thank her in my heart. My poems are not just about the past. They are about hope too. This is my story. I'm an old man. I lost love. I found pain, but I also found poetry. And that poetry gave me a new life.